Every single Sunday, there are people sitting in bars with face paint on, screaming at a screen until their throats are raw. And then there are people like you, people who watched the whole thing happen and genuinely wondered why. Not out of judgment, out of complete bewilderment. And here's what's wild. The reason you don't care might have absolutely nothing to do with personality, but everything to do with how your brain is built. According to neuroscience, your brain isn't broken. It's just running a completely different program than the one society assumes everyone is using. Today, we are going to break down exactly why some people can look at the biggest sporting event on the planet and feel absolutely nothing. Not sadness, not anger, nothing. We are also breaking down why that's actually way more interesting than most people realize, with roots from our primitive instincts. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Society has decided that caring about sports is a baseline human trait. If you don't have a team, you are weird. If you can't follow a conversation about last night's game, something's off about you. It has become this unspoken social norm that nobody ever asked for. But here's the thing. The assumption is based on nothing except the fact that a lot of people do it, and a lot of people doing something has never been a reliable indicator that everyone should. So why does sports culture feel so universal in the first place? Well, it goes back to something deeply primitive. Humans didn't evolve to be solo creatures. For hundreds of thousands of years, belonging to a group wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the difference between living and dying. Your tribe fed you. Your tribe shielded you. The desire to belong, to feel like part of something, didn't just disappear because we stopped hunting for food. It just found a new meaning. And sports have become just that new meaning. When you watch your team play, your brain isn't just entertained, it's participating. Neurochemically, the experience of watching strangers compete triggers oxytocin, the same bonding chemical your brain releases when you're around people you actually love. Isn't that fascinating? For devoted fans, watching a game isn't passive. Their nervous system is genuinely invested, like these athletes are members of their own family, and that's not even a metaphor. That's literally what's happening chemically. But here's where the story splits. Because not everyone's brain responds to that same trigger. People who don't care about sports often have what researchers describe as weaker tribal drive. Their sense of identity isn't built around group membership. They don't need an external we to feel whole. And studies back this up. Research has consistently shown that people with low interest in sports demonstrate significantly less in-group versus out-group thinking. They're not automatically hostile toward the other side because they're not even thinking in sides. That entire framework just doesn't activate for them. Now let's talk about what's actually happening inside the brain of someone who gets genuinely fired up watching sports because it's almost uncomfortably similar to addiction. You know that split second before something exciting happens, that edge of your seat anticipation? That's dopamine, and for sports fans, that chemical hits over and over during a single game. Every play, every close call, every moment where the outcome is still uncertain. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It's the exact same reward structure that makes gambling so impossible to walk away from. The unpredictability is the whole point. Your brain can't predict what's coming next, so it keeps flooding you with dopamine to keep you watching. Brain imaging studies have actually shown that the neural pathways activated during intense sports watching overlap significantly with those triggered by gambling and other deeply compelling activities. It's not that fans are weak. Their brains are being chemically hijacked by a system designed over millions of years to reward anticipation. So what if your brain doesn't respond to that? If watching a stranger score a goal gives you the same emotional charge as watching paint dry, it might literally be genetic. Research conducted at the University of Chicago has suggested that genetic differences in dopamine receptor sensitivity may predict the degree to which individuals care about competitive spectator activities. Read that again. Your total indifference to whether a specific team wins or loses on a given Sunday might not be a choice at all. It might actually be encoded in your DNA before you ever watched your first game. Dopamine is only half the story, though. There's another psychological phenomenon at play here called basking in reflected glory. When fans' team wins, notice what they say. We won, not they won, we won. And when the team loses, suddenly it's they. The pronoun shifts completely. Psychologists have studied this extensively. It's a way the brain borrows identity from external success. And people who don't obsess over sports, they tend not to do this. Their sense of self doesn't fluctuate based on what happens on a field somewhere. Their self-worth stays remarkably stable, regardless of outcomes they had zero influence over. And honestly, when you think about it, that's a pretty solid psychological foundation to be standing on. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, though. Sports fans actually score higher on certain measures of empathy, which sounds strange at first. How can someone who's screaming at a television be more empathetic, But the research makes sense when you look at it closely. Fans practice caring deeply about the outcomes of other people's lives. They're emotionally invested in strangers' struggles and triumphs on a regular basis. That's a form of empathy training, even if it's directed at people in jerseys. So if non-sports people aren't getting that same emotional exercise, where does their empathy go? The answer is that everyone has a limited amount of emotional bandwidth, and it can only stretch so far. People who don't connect with sports tend to channel that bandwidth somewhere else entirely, toward relationships that actually reciprocate, toward causes that affect real lives, toward creative and intellectual pursuits that demand genuine emotional investment. A 2021 study reported that people who were less engaged with sports demonstrated significantly higher levels of openness to experience and a greater appreciation for art and beauty. Their brains are chasing the same fundamental rewards, meaning connection and something that feels bigger than everyday routine. They're just finding those rewards in completely different places. And let's be candid about something else. For some people, the indifference towards sports isn't purely neurological. It has a backstory. Maybe they were made to feel stupid in gym class. Maybe sports culture always felt like a club with a door that was deliberately closed to them. Maybe the aggressive tribalism embedded in fandom just never felt like somewhere they wanted to live emotionally. Or maybe they simply watched grown adults lose their minds over a ball and thought, that can't be worth it. All of those are valid starting points. But here's what unites them. It all comes down to how a person finds meaning. Sports fans experience meaning through narrative, the epic comeback story, the grand rivalry that spans through decades, the underdog who defies every prediction. It's unpredictable, it has real emotional stakes, and it plays out in real time. That's genuinely compelling storytelling. But people who don't connect with sports often find that same unpredictability meaningless when it comes to strangers performing on a field. They ask themselves, why would I pour my emotional energy into an outcome I can't influence, involving people I've never met in an event that doesn't touch my actual life? And that's not cynicism. That's a different kind of logic. Psychologists draw a distinction between parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fandom is one of the most powerful examples of parasocial investment that exists. You're building a one-sided emotional relationship with people who will never know who you are. For non-sports people, that trade-off doesn't compute. They'd rather invest their emotional energy somewhere it can actually land, where their involvement makes a real difference, where they're a participant, not just a regular spectator watching someone else. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. People who aren't emotionally consumed by sports tend to report feeling significantly more present in their own experience. They're not dedicating entire afternoons to someone else's narrative arc. They're living inside their own. There's something quietly powerful about that. In a culture that constantly asks you to care about things that are completely outside your reach, choosing to invest your attention in your own life isn't disengagement. It's a deliberate decision about where your limited emotional energy actually goes. So what does all of this mean if you're someone who genuinely cannot muster a single feeling about whether a particular team wins or loses? It means your brain's reward system is calibrated differently. It means your dopamine pathways don't light up for vicarious competition. It means your sense of identity was never built on external group outcomes. It also means your empathy is being spent somewhere else, somewhere that might actually matter more to you. None of that makes you broken. None of that makes you boring. It makes you someone whose brain simply found a different path to the same destinations everyone else is chasing. The next time someone looks at you like you've grown a second head because you don't know the score, just remember that you are not missing out on some essential human experience. You are just playing a different game entirely, and yours might actually have higher stakes. If this kind of deep dive is what you're here for, the next video on this channel will break down another trait that people like you share that most people completely misunderstand. Subscribe, and you'll recognize yourself in a way you have never done before.